Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the brand new Red Ink Writers podcast. My name is Lydia Stevens, and I am the author of the Ginger Davenport Escapades and a developmental editor. I formerly worked as an intern for a literary agency and as an acquisitions assistant for Anthem Press.
And my name is Sanwit Hage, and I am a web designer, illustrator, and newbie writer working hard on becoming a published author for my very first fantasy series.
And my name is Sandy Butchers. I am the author and illustrator of the Singularian Grimoire anthologies, and in this episode we have another lineup of questions and subjects that are trending within the writing community. We have our weekly Twitter poll, we'll share a glimpse behind the scenes of a literary agent in our Intern Insights, and we'll talk about the necessity of good critique partners and how to find them.
Today's episode is brought to you by us, because we don't have any sponsors yet. However, if you do want to sponsor one of our next episodes, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter or Facebook at Red Ink Writers.
Wow, it feels like yesterday since we launched our very first episode. We have all been working so hard to get everything up and running, and now here we are again. Like I already mentioned a moment ago, today's episode is all about those elusive creatures, the unicorns of the writing world, the leprechauns underneath that rainbow. I am of course talking about critique partners, and no, I'm not saying that all CPs are tiny, fat little bastards with beards. I'm saying that finding a good CP is almost as rare as finding a pot of gold underneath the rainbow. I am very happy to say that I found my gold in Lydia, who has been my critique partner for almost 2 years now. And if I had to put the definition of a good critique partner into one single word, it would be honest. But I can't help myself but wonder what word you would use to describe the perfect CP.
Wow. One word. Well, I think that honest, I would have to agree with you on that one, Sandy. I think honesty is the most important aspect of a critique partner. But I think that honesty can be both a gift and a curse. Because as a new writer, I know how honesty can hurt. And I remember one of our first sessions, Sandy, that you gave me some critique on my main character. And I think that one of my first reactions was actually to get angry with you, because I thought she doesn't understand who this person is, and she doesn't get it. She doesn't get my vision. And I had to step away for a few days, and then that anger actually kind of turned into self-doubt, like, oh my god, I'm a fraud, I can't do this, I haven't even written a few pages and nobody likes my character. And then I realized, I came back to it and I was like, oh yeah, holy shit, she's actually right. My main character is way too wimpy and nobody's reading a diary of a wimpy kid in this one. But without that honesty, I would have never gone back to that first chapter, that first start, and look at my main character, and I actually love who she is right now. But it is, it's quite hard. Like, how do you make that work? How do you deal with brutal honesty or brutal feedback in a good way?
I think I'm gonna go ahead and step in here, and you have to. The word I would use to describe a good critique partner would be integrity. And I think you have to really have built a working relationship with your critique partner, and you're both getting out of it what you're putting into it. So when it does come to that brutal feedback, that initial kind of gut punch when you read a comment that something's just not working or something needs to be changed, you know that your critique partner isn't saying it to be malicious. They're saying it because they genuinely want you to get better as a writer. And I think that the more you develop that relationship with your CP, it becomes a little less harsh. There are still those moments where it kind of twinges a little bit because this is your baby and they're telling you to, slay your baby, and you don't want to do that. But one of the ways that I have, found to deal with that kind of brutal gut punch is read your critique partner's comments and then sit with them for a day. Don't start trying to make changes right away, because you're just the emotion's still there and it's still raw and you're still thinking, but they don't understand. They don't get, sit with the comments for a day and just let your emotions and your feelings calm down, and then go back to the work objectively and think, you know what, maybe this is a different perspective. Maybe they have a point here. And then you can, look at the comments and you find what works for your story and you change what needs to be changed. Or this is still your story. There may be some things that your critique partner suggests that you make a change, and for whatever reason, maybe later on in a series or something like that, it's just not going to work. But a good critique partner will always have the integrity to sit down and discuss with you what they mean when they make a comment, how they meant it, why they think that you need to make the change, and then you can determine from there what needs to be done with the work.
So I think listening to this, your word would actually be integrity.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I have all these memories always, like when we talk about these things, and I think back to particular situations where this would also happen to me. And it actually feels good because, Sam, for you, this is not something you do because you are a newbie writer. I mean, this happens to me as well. I remember the first couple of times when Lydia was critiquing my work. I was furious. I was like, no, this is not true. And I would go to my husband and go, this is not fair. Just like burning down my entire thing. I didn't cry, but I was mad. And then 2 days later, I sat down and was like, nah, she's right. Yeah. Okay. And then so it's not something that happens to only new writers. It's something that happens to us all, and I think it's one of the most normal things in this entire process. And I think what makes it work in the end, if you reach a point where you can take that feedback, when you're like, all right, shoot my baby, that's fine. And then you start working together, because then it doesn't become just someone putting in comments, because then you start forming a dialogue on your work. And I think that is also very important, to keep talking about what you mean. Like, and that's, I think that connects to the integrity. Like, you need to explain what you're writing. You can put down, okay, this sucks, this line is horrible, but point out what makes it horrible. And I think that's also a part of being a critique partner, that is at this point highly underrated, but it's so important.
To your point, yeah, I have noticed that whenever I look at your work, I can just shoot, and you're like, yeah, okay, got it, yeah, oh, yes, yeah. Oh no, you have really reached that point where you're like, yeah, just shoot my baby, I want it to be better, and I can distance myself from this, and that's, I agree with you that feels like you're actually working with someone on the manuscript, as opposed to it just someone only giving you feedback. And maybe that is what partnership is really all about.
On the other hand, I don't think it's entirely true what you say, because if you listen carefully to the way we discuss comments you make, sometimes I start explaining things. I'm like, no, this has to be like this, and it connects to that. And those are actually the moments where I don't agree with what you're saying. So if I go, yeah, no, it's good, and then you really have a point, and I 100% agree with you. But I think if you listen carefully, there are moments where I'm definitely like, no, shut up. That's not true. So it's in the fine print, you know.
I'd like to expand a little bit on some things here. I think a really good critique partner is someone, you've both said it, someone that you can work with. And your critique partner should be someone who's going to be as invested in your manuscript as you are, and they want to see you succeed. And likewise, you should be just as invested in their work as well, and wanting to help them make, hone their craft and really bring about the best story that they can. I would say the best sort of metaphor that I can bring to this is thinking about us like characters in a story. At first a character is going to be put into a situation and they're going to have an emotional reaction. So that's a lot like a critique partner who brings you that comment, which might be, really harsh or might seem really harsh, and we react to it at first. And then later on, you're going to find the character in the story is going to respond to that situation. That's a lot like how we respond to a critique partner's comments is, react and then respond. And then, we go about with the action, just like if we were a character in a story. And eventually, of course, in the story, your character has gone through so much crap that it's just like this wall of emotion, not emotional anymore. And you have to really kind of dig into the story to get them to react to anything. But I think we all know each other well enough that we can figure out how to get, how to say, hey, hang on, wait a minute, you're doing this thing again. Here's your catchphrase that I see, every other page, or your crutch words. Yeah. So.
And I think that also makes the biggest difference between a critique partner who I believe is oftentimes more of a long-term partnership, whereas which is later on in the writing process when you have beta readers who are only there to just give me once over and then chuck it back to you. That is not, the best critique partners are indeed the ones that are along for the ride, for the entire ride of that book. Yeah.
There is something to be said for a short-term critique. If you're looking for just a single project, you can find someone who would be a good critique partner on that project, because maybe their interests align with that specific topic. I think long-term critique partners, you can definitely find, bring a comparison to personal preferences in terms of genre. I mean, if you're both writing fantasy, then you're both going to understand the stories that you're critiquing. But for example, if you decide to work on a piece that isn't your normal genre, you may want to find a critique partner for that one project who works specifically in that niche. And, they can bring their expertise to it, and then, work with your long-term CPs for what you're usually working on.
Yeah.
Now, where would you find one of these people?
Yeah, and also, like, when you have found them, like what we have here is quite exceptional, because we ended up being friends altogether.
Yeah.
And then where did we find each other? Well, I don't know. How did we find each other? I remember I hired Lydia for my very first beta read, and then ultimately we became friends and we became critique martyrs, and it all came together. And Sam, you and I knew each other before that already. So yeah, as to where do we find CPs? I don't know. Is there any specific place to find CPs?
I think one of the best places, I've been really discovering lately that Twitter has been an amazing platform for the writing community. They're so supportive. I do get some interaction on Facebook. It really has to do with social media, and if you're joining writing groups, on social media, or even in your community, if there are writing groups or reading groups, or where they have that common denominator that there are several writers in the group with similar interests, and they really connect. I think there has to be a level of personal commitment to, like, we were friends, yes, but we're also, this is the industry that we're in. So there is that level of professionalism as well. So when we sit down to work, we work. And then we have those times where it is personal and we can just, chum around as pals and be, do our friend stuff. So I think definitely reaching out to writing groups, social media platforms, other authors that have similar interests and write in similar genres is a good place to start.
I would like to add, even if you don't actively participate in every version of Nanowrimo, I have found that the Nanowrimo Discord channel was very helpful, and actually found a few people that I might have reached out to if I hadn't had both of you to ask for a critique or to be a critique partner. But I also think that in our case, for Sandy and I, because we don't write in our native language, it can be quite hard to find a critique partner in your own country that writes in that other language, because I've seen so many reading cafes, these kind of hipstery places where you can buy coffee and buy exclusive books, where
Very
there's
expensive
writing
coffee.
groups. Yeah, very expensive coffee. Where there are writing groups, but all of these writing groups are at least in our case, are often in Dutch, which I'm sorry, but I don't want to read a Dutch story. I want to read English stories. So, the internet is the best place, I think, still, is to find a critique partner.
Yeah. And you mentioned Discord a moment ago. I think Discord is a great resource, and it's coming up as one of the top resources on where you can get connected to people. Yeah. You mentioned the Nanowrimo Discord channel. There is also the Write Hive channel, which is also free, and there's thousands of people on there, and it's so large that you can barely I don't know. There are so many people there, and it's impossible that there isn't at least one person on one of those channels, that could help you with what you're looking for. So Discord is definitely also a very good source to keep an eye on if you are looking for critique partners.
Yeah, and also, yeah, go ahead.
I would just add to that, just be careful with an audience that's so large that what you expect from a critique partner, you might not find it right away. You may have to work with several critique partners until you find someone who really meshes with your goals and objectives in the writing industry. A CP is very similar to a working relationship in the regard that sometimes it's just not, it just doesn't work well, and you have to kind of reassess what your objective is and what your expectation of your CP is.
Yeah, and in a way, it's very much like dating, actually. I mean, you meet up, you talk about things, you discuss your interests, and you discuss your goals, and well, not necessarily in life this time, but in your writing career. and exactly, sometimes it works out, and sometimes it just doesn't. And I think, realizing that something doesn't work is also very okay. But I think the key in there is that you communicate to the people, like, this is what I expect, this is what I prefer, this is how I like to work, and then it's just a matter of trial and error to get that going, get that working.
Absolutely, I agree. And I would say that you may find your critique partner someone who has been working with you for a while, and then something happens. Maybe they move, maybe they change jobs or something like that, and it's just not working anymore. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I think, a good CP relationship, both partners would realize something's just not working. So they need to communicate and work together to either refine how their working relationship is going, or maybe even consider moving on and finding a different CP that works for them. And that's perfectly okay. I mean, this industry is so fluid and changing that CPs are a part of that. And it is okay to, understand that sometimes you have to move on and be, courteous and professional about it. But hopefully, if you're like us, you find those CPs that you have been with, for a very long time, and it's very, it's such a fulfilling relationship in the industry.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I mean, what I really like about the flexibility of both of you is that when I had some personal hassles at the beginning of this year and I wasn't really feeling writing, and it was okay for me to just step out for a while. Mm-hmm. And then when I was okay to go back in and there was a warm bath, and I could just tag along again, and that was completely fine. Yeah, rose petals everywhere. No, but the thing is that what I really like about it's I think it's the same with friendships, even if you're not specifically friends. In our case, it is. The best friendships are the ones that you can that have ebbs and flows. That sometimes they're very intense and sometimes they're less intense, and that's fine. But you can always come back and pick it up. But do always communicate with your CP. I think that would be, like you said, Lydia, expectations. And that has to do with honesty and integrity. If you're not feeling it, if you know that you're in a rut, and you know that you cannot give the 100% or maybe the 150 that the other party is giving, be honest, be upfront about it.
Yeah, so you end up having basically 3 keywords here. You have the honesty that we started with, we have the integrity, and then we have communication. And I think just looking at the 3 of us, like the way we experience things, those would be 3 very important keywords when you would describe, a critique partner relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is a partnership.
I agree. Yes. Hi, welcome back. This is Lydia, and this segment of the podcast is going to be something that we've dubbed Intern Insights. This is going to be me bringing you some tips from working for a year as an intern at a literary agency and some of the things that I have learned. I'm not going to be going into specific authors and books because I cannot do that, but this is just going to be a lot of information that you may be aware of already. You may see floating around as advice from other authors and writers, but this is just kind of some of the intuition and things that I've learned from the internship that really kind of apply across the board when dealing with an agent or an agency. One of the most important aspects of querying an agent that I must stress is professionalism. This is a relationship that you are trying to build with an agent. So think of that as it's like a job. Think of your query as a cover letter, and that you are almost applying to the agency because you want this job. You want them to accept your job of taking on your manuscript and getting it published for you. Likewise, they are going to be working for you on your manuscript. So I see a lot of times the agent works for you. Yes, they do. But before you get the agent, you have to remember that you are asking them to represent you. So you need to be professional when you're asking. And there are several things that I've seen throughout my interning experience which you would think would be common sense that you should do or should not do, but I've seen it a lot, and so I just want to kind of touch base on some of those points, and that's why I decided to do the Intern Insights, to bring you those little snippets of you should do this or maybe you shouldn't do this. And I think one of the first insights that I came up with, and you would think this would be a given, please don't send something along the following lines in a query letter. My book is so great, I don't need to write a query letter. Yes, you do. Think of query letters. Yeah, you would be surprised. There are people who query and they think that it is acceptable to say this. It is not acceptable.
And just to make sure, these people are not George R.R. Martin.
No, they are not. There's your level of New York Times, USA Today, best-selling, J.K. Rowling people who they're ubiquitous. I mean, they're in a level all to themselves. So, when he goes to his agent with another book idea, that's a whole other ballgame. This is for your writer who's just trying to get an agent. Don't do that. Your query letter is a cover letter, and it is a professional relationship you're trying to develop. The publishing industry is still a career, and the professionalism should still be observed. And I know I'm very repetitive with this, but it is so important that people understand this. You might think that your work is the next best thing to George R.R. Martin. However, your agent needs to be the one to determine that. So you still have to do a query letter. Take the time to provide the best version of why you wrote this book, what this book is about, to present to an agent, because that is what is going to sell your book to an agent. That is the very first thing that they see. So it is so important that you take the time to do this step of the querying process. And do either of you have anything to add to that?
I would imagine if I would be working at an agency and I would get an email or a letter that said, I don't need to write a query because my book is so good, I would just chuck that out immediately. I wouldn't even check out a word of what you've written. So your book will never get published.
Yes, I would say 9 times out of 10, they won't look at it. They won't look at it because you have to imagine if you're going to receive an email like that, they've probably not adhered to the submission guidelines. And every agency has their own guidelines. Every agent may have individual guidelines for what they want when you query them. And it is imperative that you follow those guidelines because they read hundreds of query letters a week, a month. Don't not send a query letter. It has to stand out. So this kind of comes into the formatting of your query letter and what's in the query letter. And yes, it's going to be what your book is about. That's going to be another whole insight that I will get into. But let's talk about the mechanics of the query letter. When sending your query letter and your materials, don't write anything in multicolored fonts. It doesn't make the work stand out, and it is extremely hard to read after hours of reading queries. And again, it's unprofessional. Keep the font color black. This is your writing career. You want this first impression to be as professional as possible. And multicolored fonts are cool if you're sending a letter to a pen pal, or maybe a text, or you're posting to social media, but not to a potential business partner like an agent. And yes, people do send queries this way. I've seen the spectrum of colors, the whole rainbow, from red, blue, green, purple, orange, pink, and more. But those are the most common ones that I see. And then it's half an hour of squinting at the screen trying to read through it all, and that is so aggravating. You don't want to aggravate someone you are trying to work with. It doesn't promote a good working relationship, so please don't do it.
Yeah, from a designer standpoint, I just did. I am.
You're speechless.
I'm speechless as people do this. Wow. Yeah. I mean.
Can you imagine a query letter written in a red Comic Sans?
No!
Oh, my eyes are bleeding.
Let's talk about font. Oh my goodness. Okay. When querying, try to keep the font size and the text style the same. So when you paste the pages per the agency guidelines into the body of the email, the transfer might not line up with the email text. And the same tip applies when pasting the synopsis into the body of the email. If you select all of the text once it's in the email, you can use the font and sizing tools to make them the same. And remember, tiny font styles and size make it really difficult to read the query. Don't make the agent's job harder to read your awesome query letter. And also, if your print is too large, it can be very hard on the eyes as well. So try to stick with a size 12 to 16 font in Times New Roman or Calibri, because those are the most professional fonts to work with, and those are the easiest to read. Comic Sans is cute, and I have seen them in Comic Sans, and I'll let that one slide, but you know, try to keep all of the text uniform, because it really does do two things for your query. It makes it easier to read when the email transitions from the query letter to the first few pages and then onto the synopsis. And second, again, it looks professional.
Yeah.
This is cover letter. Make everything aligned. And so I'm going to give you a little tidbit that I will drop later on today for the hashtag Intern Insights. Please don't send a query letter where every other letter is capitalized because you think it's cute. Don't do it. I've seen it, and I can barely even get through reading it because it makes me go cross-eyed. And I guarantee that an agent that sees that it's going to make them go cross-eyed, probably with anger. Don't do that.
Cool. So if we want to have more of these tips, be sure to go to our Twitter and make sure to check out the hashtag Intern Insights for that one.
This week's Twitter poll asked what subject they were most eager to hear about. We gave 3 choices: where to find a CP, CP red flags, and the do's and don'ts for a critique partner. Twitter has spoken, and the question coming from the community was, what are CP red flags?
I would definitely start with 3 off the top of my head. The first is your critique partner should not charge you money to do a critique. That is an editor's job.
That happens?
Yes. I have had that experience where I went to somebody and wanted to form a CP relationship, and they have wanted to charge money. And it was just having a candid conversation that I'm looking for a CP, not an editor. So yes, be very.
That's even a bit awkward if that happens.
Yeah, it depends on how comfortable you are talking about money. Everyone should have an editor, but that is an entirely different topic. So just be aware that when you're looking for a relationship with a CP, it is entirely, this is as you are developing the novel. Your CP is with you during the writing process. Your editor comes after. So a CP should not be asking you for money. The second red flag I would definitely consider with CPs is they need to devote as much time to your work as you do to theirs. Now, I'm not talking about you sit down for an hour and work on their manuscript. They have to sit down for an hour and work on your manuscript. I'm talking about if you're both developing a manuscript, they should be willing to have a conversation with you, say every 2 weeks is when you're able to meet up and be as devoted to talking about your work as you are talking about theirs. So, you may be just in the first few chapters of your manuscript, and they may have a completed manuscript that's okay, as long as the relationship is ongoing in the sense that as you're writing your manuscript, they're willing to come along in that writing process with you, just as you're working on, several chapters every few weeks of their work. And so when you do your CP meetups, you're both able to come to the meeting with something to provide the other. So that goes back to the integrity of your CP partner. They need to be willing to meet you in the middle in terms of the work.
So as a red flag, that would be someone who just kind of a flaky CP.
Yes. So that goes into my third red flag, really, that is the honesty. You don't want a CP partner who's going to come to your work and say, it's great, there's nothing wrong with it, this is lovely, because your first draft of your manuscript is not great, it's not lovely, it's rough as hell.
It's general shit, yeah.
Yeah, and you need somebody who can be honest and communicate with you that, girl, you got issues with this. So, you want to be very careful of a CP who only comes to your work with, this is great, I loved it. That's really nice to hear, but that's not going to help you develop as a writer. And that's not going to develop a good working relationship with a CP. Because when I see that, I'm grateful for the compliments, but I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, man, you are so full of crap that you could manure an entire field, because that is what this manuscript is. It's manure. It's a manured field. So yes, be aware of CPs who don't ever put the effort and the honesty into your work as you do into theirs.
And compared to that, there is also a red flag for people who go way too far on critiquing. I had the experience where somebody looked at my work, and I think for every 2 or 3 lines I wrote, there was like half a page of so-called feedback. And it wasn't necessarily even feedback, it was just burning it down. And I was like, okay, so you're really fanatic about this, and that's great, it's perfect, but please give me something constructive. Don't spend an entire page just saying how bad it is. I know it's bad because it's my first draft. Yeah, that's why I have you. But then tell me what it needs, and don't just go, this is terrible. And I think that relates to the like the people who only say this is great, this is perfect. It goes the other way around as well. You really need to be careful. You need to find a balance between saying, oh, everything is great, or everything sucks. It's balance. It's a balanced job.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, you want a critique partner who isn't, we talked about this at the beginning, who isn't overly brutal. But what I mean by that is they don't make it personal, because in a critique like that, they're just critiquing you. They're not critiquing the work. Yeah. And I think that is the biggest issue that people have when finding a CP. And likewise, you need to be very aware of yourself in that, okay, is this person critiquing me or the work? And I have had CPs who have said things, why are you even writing? You don't belong in this industry.
Ouch.
So that is somebody that is a toxic person. You just don't want to be around them. Anyway, you need to be aware of a CP who just says this is bad. They need to tell you why it's bad.
Yeah, constructive feedback. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's so important.
I haven't had any bad CP experiences because I've had the both of you. You were both my first. But I would think if I looked at myself, what would I be bad at as a CP? And this is just off the top of my head. I think a red flag would be if you find a CP partner who you might actually get along with, but who absolutely does not get your genre or doesn't like your genre and tries their hardest but just doesn't get it. And I, as a fantasy writer, if I have someone who has absolutely no idea how a fantasy world operates or what world building is or what kind of things I should be mindful of, that for me would be a red flag as a CP. Not so much that they're a bad person, but just not someone to work with.
Yeah. In that case, your CP speed dating just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And that's, that happens. It's fine.
Yeah.
I really love the analogy of using speed dating. I don't know why, but it just works.
I would say another thing to watch out for in a CP is red flag is if they keep flaking on your meetings. So we all have lives, we all have things that pop up. So it's understandable, if you can find a good CP who, something happens, you reschedule, and then you keep the appointment for the reschedule. Somebody who, you've worked on their manuscript and they've got the feedback and stuff like that. You've talked about their work, and then you want some feedback on yours, and then, oh, I can't do it today. I'm this, or, oh, I can't, and then you go to reschedule. Well, that doesn't really work for me. That's just a one-sided working relationship, and that's not going to work for you. So you want to be very careful of someone who, as you get further into a critique partner relationship, starts doing that, because it means something's not working and you need to communicate with them that it's not working, or you need to move on.
Ooh, another one I thought of. If you're both working on a manuscript and you're both drafting, when you start to see pieces of your work or something that is eerily similar to what you wrote pop up in the work of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
I've read online that happens to quite a lot of people, that the CP is kind of just leeching off of you. And it's fine to be inspired by someone else's work. There is a difference between inspiring and just fraudulent copying, but be mindful of that. There are just CPs out there who really are just looking at your work as something that they can kind of pilfer from instead of add to.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Red Ink Writers podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, so please let us know your thoughts. Also, there will of course be a new listeners poll on Twitter, so do give us a follow there at Red Ink Writers. We hope to see you again on the next episode when we'll discuss killing your darlings, aka how to edit your work. And remember, you've got this, even if you don't know what the fuck you're doing.